Very pleased to welcome Jishan Uddin as this morning's presenter. He's one of a team of authors who worked on the new Mindset for IELTS series and the author of the Teacher's Book for Foundation Level, which targets students at the A2 or pre-IELTS level. An EFL teacher since 2001, Jishan has taught on a range of courses in the UK and Spain, including general English, exam preparation and academic English courses, and is currently an EAP lecturer and academic module leader at King's College London. So, over to you, Jishan.
Thanks, Jessica, and welcome everybody. It's great to be doing this. Looking at the chat box, there's a real wide range of nationalities, and it seems like everyone has a good grasp of technology already. So what I want to do today, perhaps, is not to tell you exactly what you should be using, but more about why you should be using things and the kind of theory behind different approaches and different outcomes that you want to get from your students. So in today's webinar, I've divided it up into three key areas. I want to focus on the theory first. So what does the theory say about engagement in the classroom, and where is the scope for technology within that? Then I'm going to talk about this idea of active learning, and particularly looking at how technology can help us to create this active learning experience that our students seem to be very keen on. And finally, I want us to move forwards and look at how technology can actually create more effective learners in terms of how we can create the kind of learners that we want in our classroom, the ones that are independent, for example, and the ones that can really benefit from the input we give them. So let me start by asking you a couple of questions. Again, please put your answers in the text box. So 2 questions for you. The first one is, what technology do you tend to use in your classroom? So what software, what apps, what smartphone apps or online apps do you use? And how do you make these decisions? What influences your decisions? Okay, so we've got tablets. That's kind of the device used. Okay, sure. Okay. If we focus on software, maybe. Okay, it's interesting that most people are using smartphones and tablets and laptops in the classroom. That's really good to see. Ah, there we go. Kahoot, the old favorite. I will be mentioning Kahoot today. Quizlet, yeah, sure. There's a few new ones I'm not sure about. Okay. Okay, so people think assignment usage is good for using this is good for that. Okay, some interesting ideas here. Okay, yeah, okay, so it sounds as I thought. There's lots of tech-savvy people here that are very keen to use technology. So that's really good to see. And even if you're not, I hope that we can look at a few ideas today, and we can develop and move forward with how we use tech in the classroom, and most importantly, why we're doing it. Okay, so let's start with maybe contentious, or maybe not, maybe something that you experience. Ideas about engagement. So if you've been teaching for a long time, have you noticed that maybe engagement levels of your typical students have gone down over the years in terms of a new profile of student? Is that really a fair thing to say? I don't know. And if it is true, what is it we can do about it? So many of us are teaching younger students, let's say, than we were 10, 15 years ago, naturally. Perhaps we're looking at millennials or even younger people in even younger generations. And maybe one issue that we start thinking about is whether or not there are issues with attention. For example, our new students compared to the students of 10 years ago or 20 years ago, do they have issues with attention? Are they difficult to maintain their attention and their engagement in your classroom? Are they constantly being distracted? Is this really a fair thing to be saying? Well, this generation, quite interestingly, are known as digital natives. So they have been exposed to information technology for a lot of their lives, more than we have and more than any other generation so far. So that's quite an interesting idea. Surely this must have an effect on their learning styles, on their thinking, on lots of things in their lives. And perhaps this is the new reality that we face as teachers, and we need to think about how our lessons can kind of be tailored in order to match this idea. But let's think about this idea of attention. It's a bit contentious, it's a bit judgmental maybe, and maybe we're basing it on a few experiences anecdotally. Is it really a fair thing to say that our students are not as don't have a wider span of attention as they have in the past? Let's see what the research suggests. So, according to McLaughlin and others, apparently students' attention spans do decline after 10 minutes. So if we were suspecting this to be true, this does suggest it is true. So after 10 minutes, it declines and continues to decline until the last few minutes of lesson, where students perhaps refocus with the end in sight. Maman Hospital, they have a similar idea, but they put it down to this desire for information all the time, kind of 24/7 information seeking. I mean, I'm sure a number of us understand the feeling. We're constantly looking at our phones to see what information's come through, even if it's not that important, and it could wait. We probably still constantly want this information, and particularly the access to it. And there's also this idea of social learning or social learning from peers, developing ideas collaboratively, which is developed as well. As a result of being this generation that are so used to having technology at their fingertips for so much of their lives, it's understandable that students have become accustomed to experiences which are technological in nature, but particularly collaboratively. In terms of social media, in terms of shared platforms, this is inevitable. So what we're looking at here is that students have a desire for information, they have a lot of smartphone usage, screen time is very high, social media usage is very high. So what effect does this have? I mean, we can see that attention is an issue, but what effect does this have? And does that mean we have to do something different ourselves? Okay, so is it a case then that we need a new approach based on sound pedagogy, of course, but does this mean that we need to change the way we deliver our lessons? So some research says actually, rather than focusing on judgmentally looking at attention span and saying it's not as good as it used to be, perhaps it's not a case of that. Perhaps it's a different kind of students have different needs these days, and therefore the way we instruct them, the way we inform them, these types of approaches need to change accordingly. So, understandably, and I'm sure we're the same as well, this idea of passive learning that we may have seen in the past isn't something that our students these days want to see. Again, according to research, teachers are seen as maybe coaches that stimulate and challenge students' thinking, maybe helping them to become problem solvers, rather than maybe an image of information being passed to students and students taking that on board, maybe less critically. So, in this case, we need to think about how we're going to develop active learning strategies, because this is clearly what our students want. Technology, as I'm going to show you in the next section, can really help us to deliver these things. So I want to talk later on as well about this idea that we want to move from a surface approach to learning to a deep learning, in particular looking at how our learners can become deep learners themselves. I'll explain that a bit later, but that's something that's quite key and goes hand in hand with active learning. So what do we mean by active learning? So these are kind of different types of learning. Perhaps we could be thinking about informal small groups, cooperative projects, so group work together either formally or informally, and particularly things like self-reflection. And a number of researchers have come to this conclusion as well. This idea that we reflect as students on our progress, on what we're doing well, and particularly on what we're not doing as well. So that's an idea so the theory is kind of pointing to students are used to a different way of learning, particularly, but of lots of things because of their technology use. In addition, they're used to a different way of getting information and a different way of processing that information. And we want, as teachers, therefore, to facilitate this active learning experience. So I want us to think about what do we mean by technology? What is it that technology can do to create this active learning experience? So if this is the aim, which is we want to create active learning, how does technology help us with that? And remember, technology is really particularly useful with millennials and younger students, as it kind of matches what they're used to anyway. Okay, in this section, I'm going to talk about many options. I mean, sorry, there are many options in this section for technology. In this section, I want to focus on a few examples that I use. I'm sure you have others, but the key is that we always think about what is the theory related to this and why are we using this. It's not just as a crowd pleaser, perhaps, but there's a real pedagogic reason as to why we're using this particular technology or this particular software for this task. Okay, so we're going to be looking at examples taken from the book series that myself and others helped to write. This book is a very recent book, and the pedagogy is very up to date, and there is already an interactive element built into it. But it's good to use this because it's easily techified, I've called it, if this is a word, which means that we can adapt the material in the book to create better engagement using technology. And I wrote the teacher's book for the foundation level, and part wrote it for level 3. And within those, there are examples of how I believe we can techify materials in extension activities, for example. So we're going to use, as I said, we're going to use exercise from here in order to illustrate these approaches. So let's start off with a few simple strategies. So remember, our students are really into their screen time and the visual nature of everything. So I want to think about how can we recreate this in order to get these easy wins to get students on board early on. So before we talk about more active learners, I want to think about how can we give students what they're used to. So what is it they're used to? As I said, it's device usage, it's visual learning, it's lots of things like that. So what I tend to do is I think about how we can increase the use of 2D screens, either projected. I know someone in the audience has talked about how they use a projector for their material. So either projected or on devices, handheld devices. And what we can do is we can look at things like scanning material so that we can easily project it. And I often do that with something like JotNot or a smartphone scanner. There are many options there. Or maybe I can link material to a website using a QR code. Again, very easy to do. I've got an example here of goqr.me. There are so many, and you can see that by doing this, what you're doing is you're moving it from the book onto a projected screen, or even you're adding extensions to a smartphone. And all of this adds to the interactive nature of the classroom. So these are easy wins. I'm not saying necessarily pedagogically they are amazingly effective or amazingly sound, and we should definitely use it all the time. But perhaps these are kind of the easy wins that students will kind of become more engaged with just because of the visual nature of it. It's really important to note as well at this stage that Mindset offers an online module for the series, and what this does is it adds to the interactivity of the course material. So students often do this work at home, and they and teachers can identify what's been going well, how they've progressed. So this is an interesting idea. So already the book has this interactive element to it. We're going to talk more about the book and particularly the online modules later. So let's think about this again. Remember, the research is telling us that we want to create active learning, and our students want active learning, preferably through technology. So let's have a think. So far, people have already told me about Kahoot. And yeah, let's look at the idea of gamification of learning. Okay, so the idea that we're creating competition. So those who like competitive activities can be well suited here. Kahoot is a common one. Socrative, Quizlet Live. There are many, many others available. I tend to use a mixture of Kahoot and Socrative, sometimes Quizlet. But let's think about why we do it. So what is the goal behind it? Is it simply a case of our students like it, it's fun, it changes the dynamics of the classroom, or is there something deeper behind it, or are there things that we should be careful of? So it is interactive, of course. It is a crowd pleaser as well. I don't know many students who don't like this type of gamification, although I'm sure some do exist. But where does it match with theory? So thinking about the research and thinking about how active learning is key, if we can create an environment where students are having informal discussion and collaboration using these technologies, then of course this works really well. And as a teacher, it's a really good tool for informal, quick assessment of knowledge, of skills, of what you've taught, basically. So a very simple example, again taken from mindset. So you've got this, you've got a listening activity where students have to put the answer in based on a multiple choice exercise. That can be easily turned into, as you can see here, this is a Socrative uh, activity. Students can you can simply turn it into the multiple choice exactly the same as it is. You can say what the correct answer is, and you've kind of created a not only competitive but an interactive version of this. We're not talking about anything massively difficult here or massively revolutionary, but this is something that can be done quite easily. Now, I wanted to also talk though about how, while these are all great tools in many ways, and they're valuable, definitely valuable, there are a few things that maybe we should be careful of, be aware of. Firstly, it's the danger of overusage. Students like them, and if students like them, why don't we give them more? But there is always a danger of overusage. Perhaps we need to vary the software we use, or vary how we use it. So instead of just the multiple choice questions 1 to 4, for example, have different types of questions, perhaps open questions, text questions. I know Socrative allows you to have open text questions. Also, the other one, rather than it just being teacher pace, where the teacher moves from question to question, students work really quickly to answer the question, how about maybe something more like, say, Socrative's space race? This is where students work together in groups. It's not a race, despite what the name says. It's about how much students get by the end of it. So basically, students work together. They go from question to question, discuss it, answer, and at the end we see who scored the most. So what the key is, we really want to create the need for collaboration, discussion, peer learning maybe, or peer assistance, but not just this idea of speed. Whoever answers quickest gets the points. I know that sometimes Kahoot can do this, and in a group what you might find is that one person knows the answer, and before discussing anything presses answer A, and they may well be correct, but what's really happened in that situation? How has that really benefited everybody else in the group? So I want us to think about how these great tools can be useful to help us, but maybe just to be a bit wary of them, definitely. And I've noticed somebody says students need time to reflect. Absolutely. Students definitely need that sort of time to reflect on the answers, reflect on why their answer is something and why it's not something else, for example. So if, for example, these tools are good but maybe not perfect, or maybe we need to add to that, let's think about more active learning ideas. So again, you can see in the top right, I've taken an exercise from one of the mindset books at level 2 over here, and it looks like it's the book, but what I've done is I've used a smartphone scanner to take the copy of that exercise, and I've moved it online. So I want to talk about how we can use collaborative and interactive software for IELTS tasks. I've used Padlet. There are many other options available. Padlet is one that I think has been used many times and people are familiar with. So what I've done here is I've created the exercise, but I put it online, and students can drag the answers. They can fill in and annotate the images. Okay, so it kind of replicates what's in the book, but adds a technological element to it. So I think this type of collaborative activity is particularly good for planning activities. So you want lengthy activity, you want to brainstorm ideas, or you want to match and comment on tasks. So shorter tasks or rehearsal tasks could be useful. Okay, so by doing this, perhaps the speaking activity or the writing activity that follows may well be better because students have practiced, rehearsed, have thought about it. So it may well generate better performance in their discussions, in speaking and writing tasks. And of course, it uses the smartphone that students have in their hand a lot of the time. or the laptop or the tablet that we're using, it kind of focuses a group of students together and maybe encourages more interactive, more collaborative ideas. And of course, if you have a Padlet page for different groups, they can compare their answers with other groups, which also adds an element to this. So the other thing I've got here, so we're moving away from, say, the shorter collaborative work to a bit more lengthy work. So this is taken from the Foundation book, an IELTS writing email task. So basically, students are writing collaboratively and interactively, working together. I've used an example from my classes at university. We're using Office 365, Word Online, or even PowerPoint Online. And the two images at the bottom you can see are my classrooms, where I've got students who are working together, 3 or 2 on a computer. They're creating something together. And I'm going to explain to you what the colours in the table refer to. Okay, so this is actually a real activity I did in my writing classes. And what you can see is I've created different pages or different boxes for different groups. I've asked them to do their work in the blue box, and students are going to work collaboratively there. I've added live comments. As I watch each group, I've added comments to suggest where it could be better, what the issues are. And then I've added an area for peer comments where other students can write, okay, what was good, what could be better, okay? And then this allows students to reflect on that. Let me explain maybe a possible way of doing this. So, as you can see in the images, students are working together on small devices. Okay, so I like to think that we should put maybe students into groups of 2 or 3, but definitely not one person on each device, because we really want to encourage this idea that students are working collaboratively and discussing their answers. Okay, so students are doing an activity. In this case, it's an academic writing activity, but students are working together, talking to each other, making their decisions as to what their answers should be. At the same time, I am able to check everyone's answers in real time. So I don't have to, let's say, collect the work in, mark it afterwards and give feedback. I can very quickly spend 30 seconds to a minute looking at each one, adding a comment, moving to another group, adding a comment. Hopefully this will encourage students to then respond to my comment. So I want to encourage them to discuss. So maybe I won't be saying, this is what the answer is, but maybe asking questions like, are you sure that's the right thing? Could you do this a bit differently? Things like that. And students hopefully will be encouraged to talk to each other and change. Obviously, they know that the teacher is suggesting a change and they have to identify what to do. After writing, so they finish their activity, I ask students, and in the green you can see this, I ask students to look at another group's work. And what you can do is you can encourage students to write kind of constructive feedback. So what we're talking about here is it's difficult sometimes. Students may not want to give feedback for fear of embarrassing each other, or maybe students can be too critical in their feedback. So what I've looked at is maybe helping them with checklists, or in terms of feedback, or directing their feedback about what was good, what could be better. I could have had a checklist to say, okay, talk about this, tick if this worked, if this was good, if this wasn't as good. So that's a good idea to do this. So students then look at the comments from the teacher and from other students and discuss together, okay, did we like that? Do we agree with that? Are we accepting those? Are we not going to do that? Okay. And then finally, what you can do is, as a teacher, you can do a whole class feedback where you look at different ones and you give a definitive answer as to whether or not it was correct or not, or how it could be improved. Okay. As you can see in the pictures, I don't know if you can actually, the one on the right is this image, the image of the green, blue and yellow table. The one on the left is actually that's using PowerPoint Online. I wanted to create something a little bit more visual. So students have worked together to do the same sort of thing. And instead of having a space for feedback in terms of on the actual document, in the notes section underneath the PowerPoint slide, you can encourage students to write their feedback there. So in both cases, it's collaborative, it relies on peer feedback, it relies on discussion, relies on teacher feedback, and students hopefully will learn by this and create something better later on. Okay, so that's kind of the idea there, that we're looking at what is it students want: active learning, collaborative discussion, work, and creating it. And of course, technology has provided all of that here. So rather than, as I said, individuals working alone creating homework, writing homework, teacher taking homework home, returning it with feedback. All of this has been done in the class. Students have also learned from each other. As a teacher, perhaps it will take a bit of time for you to create the online documents, but create templates. It doesn't take that long, but it would definitely save you on the marking afterwards, as you simply don't need to be giving the feedback and handing back the work in this type of activity. Of course, there may be times where you want to do that, but not here necessarily. Okay, I want to talk about another collaborative tool. This I only discovered relatively recently, and I've used it at university relatively recently, and I think students really like it. And I'm going to explain it. It's called Flipgrid. Now, what do we use it for? So perhaps we could use it for, instead of the writing element, but the speaking element. Okay, so what we have is we have a classic IELTS speaking activity, and you can see here bottom left from the foundation book. And I in fact also talked in the teacher's book about how students can record it, rehearse it, and improve on it, and give feedback to each other. Well, Flipgrid actually allows us to do this. So the activity is asking students to talk about food, who makes it, when they eat it, why they like it. So it's a low-level idea in terms of the task. It isn't particularly demanding, but it's a foundation book. So using Office 365 again, and I'm hoping that your institutions have an institutional package, or at the very least, I think it can be free. With the Office 365 package. So with Flipgrid, what do we do? Flipgrid records videos you can create videos of 30 seconds to 1 minute 30 of yourself speaking. So it's particularly useful for speaking tasks. So students will record their answers. So as you can see, students are going to record their answer to this IELTS task. After they've recorded, they could re-record it until they're happy. I find that students do that. I know some students are a little bit shy about showing their face maybe on camera. There are workarounds. They can record a picture while they speak, or there are other ways rather than if that's not what if they don't want to, if they feel shy, let's say, about that. Then, and as you can see actually in the I think they're called avatars. Some people have added silly, well, maybe silly, but sort of fun images to kind of cover their faces or to create a different identity. So students then, after recording, they can listen to each other and give feedback, again, through the medium of a video, okay? So then students could respond to that feedback by recreating or redoing their activity. So you can see that students are recording, and it creates a great what's the word? A grid. This is called a grid. And each class you can have a grid, and each time you can create a different discussion question. So students are listening to each other, learning from each other, giving feedback to each other, rehearsing, re-recording, okay? And with these avatars, and you can see the picture in the middle, kind of you can add costumes, hairstyles, and things like that. There's an element of a social media type thing, which could be quite a nice way of learning socially. So again, in terms of collaboration, in terms of visual appeal, this is a really, really useful tool. And perhaps it could be useful for generating discussion. I did a discussion in class recently, and I did notice that students were much better having rehearsed this, having had the activity done online at home before, perhaps, or even in class before, and then moving to a bigger class discussion. This was a lot easier, and it really, most students found it fun. Aside from that element of shyness, which I think we can work around particularly. So I think this is a really good tool. And remember, it's this idea that we want to encourage collaboration, this time in terms of speaking. Okay, I've spoken for quite some time, so I've got a couple of questions for you. So do you think that technology helps you to encourage students to work collaboratively and provide peer assessment? And what other tech options are there that could do this? So I've talked about a few, but I'm sure you have many more. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to think about these two questions. Okay, so people definitely recognize that it's useful to use technology to create this kind of environment of collaboration and peer assessment. That's nice, talking about people creating their own plays about daily life. That's nice. Very true. Google Docs offers very similar collaborative work to PowerPoint Online and Word Online. I think I focused on this because our university has that subscription and because all the students have the same what's it called, domain name, I think it's called, it's easy for them to sign in and use it. But Google Docs, of course, is possible. Wordwall, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that one. It sounds maybe a bit like Padlet. I'm not sure. Yeah, Google Suite, I'm sure, is very similar to Office 365. Similar sort of ideas there as well. That's interesting. Without the teacher, I mean, that would be the dream, wouldn't it? If the teacher wasn't involved, or just as a facilitator to set things up. And then I can see lots of things about creativity being developed by using technology. Yeah, definitely. I think we have to recognise that as teachers and as instructors that our students are different, not necessarily in a good or bad way. Hopefully in a good way, but they're definitely different, and that they have different needs. Okay, and absolutely, the last comment is very true. Teachers need to plan how these activities work and how they tie into objectives. Absolutely, and I think this talk I'm doing today is kind of hoping that to identify this idea that whatever we use, let's think about why we're using it. What is it we want to create? Okay, thank you very much for that feedback and your ideas. Lots of good ideas from you. Looks like you're already doing some really good things. Okay, so the third section of today's webinar, I wanted to focus on this idea of, so we've talked about how students are different and technologically savvy and have different needs. We've then talked about how we match their needs by looking at different technological options. I want to take it the next step, the next logical step, I think, which is how can we use technology to actually make and create better learners, more effective learners? How can we turn them into the learners that we kind of want? So this might be some sort of utopian dream, but this is maybe the dream of every teacher to kind of have this idea of how is it that we can make our students even better learners than they have been, even more independent, even more critical, even more able to reflect on their own learning and to develop strategies. And I've got a question here, but I think we know the answer. Can tech help? Yeah, I think so. I think that there are options available to us that can really create this better learner, hopefully. So, at the beginning, I talked about deep and surface learning, and I said I would come back to it. So, I'm coming back to it. This is a theory from Biggs in 1999. I think him and others have written about this before. But if you look at the two ideas here, on the left you've got deep learners, right? So deep learning, the idea of deep learning, and on the right you've got surface learning. There's lots of information here, but if I were to think about maybe thinking critically about newly learned material is very much a deep learning idea. Relating topics to past knowledge and experience, that's a really good idea as well. Maybe being motivated from within, so rather than having external motivation from teachers, parents, from other things, you're motivated from within. And in terms of that, that looks like a good student or a student I'd want in my class, compared to maybe a surface learning approach, which is basically maybe students are not particularly reflective, they're memorizing lots of things. As a result, the tasks are really boring or monotonous and they don't see them as enjoyable. And particularly that they're externally incentivized. So that means that they're thinking that they need an IELTS 6 rather than what are they doing to get this IELTS 6 or 7, for example. So and in addition, they're kind of reciting things, regurgitating materials inactively. So again, we talked about this idea we want to move from passive to active, and I think we can see deep is much more active, surface is much more passive. In addition to that, Carol Dweck created something called mindsets, which is different to the book, but a happy coincidence. And she had two types of mindset in mind: mastery mindset and a fixed mindset. Just looking at the names, we can already guess that we want a mastery mindset, and that's the idea that the students see knowledge acquisition and attainment as a process, and that through hard work and dedication they can develop that. They just need to change how they're doing things. They can improve how they're doing things. That's the idea of a mastery mindset. And contrast that to perhaps a fixed mindset, which is that you've either got it or you haven't. You're either clever and you're talented or you haven't. Okay, and these are fixed traits that cannot be easily changed. If you imagine a student with those attitudes rather than a mastery mindset, they may well be giving up earlier. They may well think they've got enough ability already, they don't need to learn. So it's a really important idea. And I've kind of married the two. The idea we want a deep learner with mastery mindset. Okay, so those are things that we want as a result of our teaching. Okay, so the question is, how do we do this? How can we get that from our students? Can we cultivate these types of learners? And the key is reflection, self-reflection. So we talked about collaboration previously, we talked about gamification, competition. Now I want to focus on this idea of reflection. So technology, of course, offers a solution for that. I'm going to talk about that now. So in terms of reflection, there are some very simple tools available to us. So for example, Poll Everywhere is something we use at university to get a snapshot of opinions. Mentimeter is another one. There are many, many more. So basically, I want to know the image here is how confident are you about, I can't remember what it was, it might have been more academic, but how confident are you about IELTS task 2, 3, whatever it is. And students, you can have an idea about how they're feeling. This is a nice visual one. Students can say, okay, I'm feeling very confident, so I'll go to the green, or actually I'm not. And it's anonymous, which is good as well, so students don't feel embarrassed by that. What I find is it's a nice way to get a snapshot before and after doing tasks. And of course, we want to see that students are moving from the red towards the green after they've done the activity and reflected on things. So that's a very basic way of getting students to reflect on their ability, their skills, what they're doing, their feelings, for example. If we want to move on to something a bit more challenging rather than something as simple as that, we can look at OneNote, again Office 365, which offers maybe a more intermediate reflective idea. So basically, OneNote is also there's a classroom version called Class Notebook. That's it, OneNote Class Notebook, which is also quite useful to create kind of class sets. But realistic, in essence, what I want to do is for students to create like a learning journal. So what they're doing is they're able to write what they've been learning, what they've been doing, what processes they've been focusing on, and that's really important. Remember, for the mastery mindset, is to focus on the process. So what are the processes they're doing? How successful were they? What they'll do differently in the future, for example, and that's a key idea of reflection. Because it's online and technology offers these solutions to us, they can share them with each other. Students can learn from other people's experiences, which is a really nice way of developing and learning good habits and good strategies. Okay, so again, this is OneNote, another option for you. There are many other ways of doing it. The advantage of the class notebook is that you can group students together and you can share in collaborative spaces, but there are many, many options for you. Now, I did this for one of my academic subjects, and I wanted students to write something like this, which is basically they had an essay they wrote, what worked well, what do they do, what were their process, they reflect, and then they think about what they'll do differently next time, and finally they say so what was not as good and how they would do things differently. It's a simple visual effect, and it's taking Kolb's learning cycle to kind of turn reflections into actions here. Okay, the content's not that important, but it's more about the idea about how we learn, and this is something we can put on OneNote quite easily, and we can learn from each other. And I encourage my students to create something like this. This is the model I gave them based on essay writing. Another tool which maybe moves on from OneNote, again it's part of the Office 365 package, and I'm hoping it's free to everyone, if not everyone, as many as people as possible. It's called Microsoft Sway. Now, Sway is used for many things, particularly creating simple blogs, for creating simple presentations, maybe. But what I find is really useful, it gives a really customizable and visually appealing outcome in terms of what students are preparing. Okay, so basically what students are doing, it's very customizable. You can add images of your choice, you can add text where you want to, and it's great for tablets, it's great for smartphones. It's all optimized for all of those things, and it actually is very intuitive. But the key is, again, students are creating a reflective journal. Okay, so what that means is that, again, what they've learned, what processes they're going through, how it's developed, things like that, and they share it, and with this they can collaborate together and they can publish it online, and it will look like a website or a blog, for example. So it's really quite useful. A couple of my students one summer I asked them to do this to see how they developed from week to week, and I mixed it up between visiting London to what we did in class. Just wanted to encourage students to create a learning journal and a learning journey, in fact, as well. So we record what students have been done and what they can see each other. So you can see one of my students was talking about coming to England, what they did in class, where they visited, the activity that they did. So it was nice to do that, and then it was good for them to reflect on how it would affect their writing, for example. So you can see this is nice. This is a dark background with a few images. There are so many templates that are available. It really is unbelievably customizable, and students really enjoy the ones that fully engage with this. Really enjoyed the customizability and creating these visually very appealing images for others to look at and to learn from. And I said I'd come back to the online modules. So remember, Mindset has these modules that accompany the book, and what students can do, they do these online and often at home, and students can, and the teacher, of course, also has access to these, can monitor progress. They can monitor their own progress, and that's really important. If we're going to reflect on what we're doing well, what's going well, what could be better, it's important to see the results of our practice. Okay, so students are looking at how they did and thinking about, okay, what did I do well there? Okay, I did that well. I didn't do that well. Next time I'm going to do it differently. And maybe, hopefully, they can see how their progress improves in terms of the results online after they use better strategies, for example. So it helps students to measure and quantify their progress and, crucially, reflect on good practice. And that can be used with these learning journals in terms of students can reflect on it online and collaboratively. Those type of things could be useful there. Okay, so that's really quite an important that's quite an important idea. So I've got a couple of questions for you. So do you feel your students reflect enough on their learning journeys, sorry? And what other tech options could be useful here? Okay, so we've got SurveyMonkey, which is a good way of kind of identifying opinions. Surveying, okay, sure. I like the idea of keeping a blog and a diary, and I wonder if SurveyMonkey can create that as well. I don't know. I haven't used it as much. I've used it to kind of get students' opinions quickly or other people's opinions quickly. But a blog and diary really helps them reflect on their practice, what they're doing. Okay, interesting. Okay, so people are going with the Padlet blogs and things like that. It's difficult. I think it's difficult to encourage students. It's a real culture shift to do this, to reflect, I think. But it is crucial to do it. And I wonder if students do it collaboratively or check each other's, have access to each other's readily, if that helps them to take part in this and fully engaging in this. Certainly, they have ownership of what they're creating, which can be very appealing, particularly visually. After a 10-week course, having a look to see what they've learned, it could be useful to revise from as well. Sure, undoubtedly for younger learners, this is something that is a culture shift, definitely, and maybe something that would be difficult. So perhaps using these visually attractive means of creating blogs, for example, that might possibly, if we think about how students are very much social learners, our students these days, perhaps this will help them. And of course, that's exactly what we want. We want students to be these perfect students who take responsibility for their learning as much as that's not always 100% possible to use. Okay, thank you for that. So based on the experiences and the kind of theory, the example technology and things like that, I want us to think about how we can create a systematic approach. I noticed somebody saying don't overdo tech. We can't use it all the time, and it's true. It's true. There are some seriously important guidelines that we need to be careful of. Tech for tech's sake is an issue. So, of course, one key is vary it. Use various combinations to create enhanced engagement. but have a range of stages. So always think about what's the theory saying? What is it I'm trying to do here? What is it I want to achieve with this activity? Rather than maybe focusing on what do students like. Of course, that's important. That definitely is important. But thinking about what stages you're going to have. Are you going to start with some sort of reflection, or maybe start with some sort of simple gamification planning or brainstorming activity, and then move to a different activity later? In terms of reflections, these can go before and after activities, particularly to show difference, to show how, okay, so I didn't feel confident before, now I do, or what did I do before and how has it changed? Start and end of lessons are also a good time, maybe even after class in a learning journal, for example. And if you remember the example of Padlet, there are shorter collaborative tasks that could be used with Padlet or something like that to get people to plan together. So that's quite a nice one. So that's one other activity in terms of you might want to put that before a longer activity. And then it's always good, I think, to finish with, or certainly nearer the end of a lesson, a longer collaborative task for freer practice. So that could be, if you remember, online, Word Online, PowerPoint Online, or even Flipgrid as well is another really nice way of creating that sort of thing. And if we are going to have the competitive Kahoots, for example, which are great in many ways, perhaps vary how you do it. And that stage should be, in terms of the gamified learning, shouldn't be overused. Vary which platform you're using. I think that's a word, which app you're using, and particularly the types of questions and types of activities, and think about what it is you're trying to achieve with that. So, based on all of this, as a conclusion, what do we think in terms of how has technology? What is it we want? What's the main message here? So definitely, I think we can see how technology enhanced learning really can create competitive environments, collaborative environments, and reflective environments. And we can see how that can really help us with the improvement of engagement that we are seeking and that we want to achieve. And a kind of thing I said earlier, we can't just use tech for tech's sake. Just because you know it, students like it, it's important that we think about why we're using it. Of course, somebody who likes technology like myself, I want to use it as often as possible. I just maybe need to take a step back to think about why I'm doing it. I noticed a comment saying not overdoing it, not doing it. Maybe the older, more traditional approaches could work at times as well to break up technology, which students could appreciate as well. So always think about what is the aim behind your choice of technology. So what is it you really want to get out of it? Which aspect of active learning? Remember, that's the key here. What aspect of active learning are you focusing on here? And that will help you design what the method, the technology, the approach you're going for. Think about that first, and then the options are available. And with everything, variety is key. Students, like everyone, want variety. I think the same things, as much as you like maybe some sort of security in terms of knowing what's happening, variety is key to avoid any boredom. Repetition, remember, we're talking about boredom and engagement. Repetition may well lead to having a negative effect if we're always using the same approach. Doesn't mean we have to use something completely different, but something different, some varying it slightly would help to avoid this. So maybe the last message, the kind of take-home message to say is maybe we acknowledge that we have different types of learners, that the millennials and younger generations have different needs and are very much more tech savvy and just surrounded by technology more so than we were. Maybe that's not fair completely to say. I don't know everyone's ages here, but certainly they have new realities. There are new students, contemporary students' needs are different. So we need to think about how we build lessons around that. And of course, technology is the answer for many of these issues. So I've referred to a number of sources. Here are the full sources. A lot of them you can see refer to flipped learning, which is something I haven't touched on today, but of close relationship because of the idea of technology. Looking at different types of learning environments. So feel free to look more at that in your own time if that's something you want to discuss or look into further. So, if I leave it with open questions up for anyone who, if you've got anything you want to know more about or any comments you have, please feel free to enter in the text box.
Thank you, Jish. That was a really informative session. So, um, if anyone has any questions that they want to ask now, we've got some time left to take those questions. Please do type them in the chat box. We've got someone asking if we can go back to the previous slide, so I'm just going to put that up on the screen for a moment. There we go, with the references. So we've got a question there from Erica. Is it possible to gather students in different ages in the same classroom?
Okay, so I mean, we're talking about different ages. Let's have a think. So varied. Are we talking big ages, big age differences? Or are we talking about within the school different year groups? Okay, let's imagine it's a large age range. So we've got maybe older, more mature students. Is the kind of question more focused on making sure they're both technologically savvy enough to use it? I'm not sure, but I don't see any issues with technology being used and having a range of ages. I mean, there may well be issues of desire to use technology or confidence in terms of using technology. So I would say maybe a bit of training, student training would be necessary, but I don't envisage this being too much of an issue having different ages for different in the same classroom using technology. I don't see this necessarily having a problem, being a problem. Sorry.
Thanks, Jishan. And we've had a question in from Brian who says, how can we use tech to promote only speaking skills in students? Have you got any suggestions?
Sure. So only speaking skills. So if we're focusing on that, if you remember the Flipgrid idea, there's a Flipgrid video thread, I think it's called. It's the idea, I suppose, of recording, rehearsing, re-recording, getting feedback on it, then redoing it. That could encourage the production of speaking. There is also maybe technology which is voice recognition, which is quite an interesting idea. I didn't mention it today, but voice recognition software is used so you can speak and and the computer says what you've said, right? So it's not actually used for educational purposes, but you can turn that around and you can think about how students can use this voice recognition to check that their pronunciation is working, because the computer can recognize it or not recognize it, and so they may need to re-record or re-say what they're. So there are different bits of technology which can help students. If it's about encouraging them to be confident in speaking, then rehearsal is really good, planning is really good, and we've seen a few of the strategies there as well. There's a few of the software options today as well. Okay, I've got a question here from Christine. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, we've got time for another question.
Okay, so how many hours would it take to finish the whole book while okay, I can see the idea here. Yeah, sure, of course. The textbook is big, and then you're adding these activities, extra activities. Of course, firstly, it takes you as a teacher some time, perhaps not as much as we might fear, but definitely it does take some time. And can we really finish the course book? Well, that all depends on the teacher prioritizing what is it you want to focus on, what is it you want to prioritize, is it every single activity, how much time do you have as well in terms of how much time is there in the course. If, for example, you want to use a technology but are a bit worried about how much time you have and how much it would affect what's left to do, perhaps you could put some of it online at home. Perhaps you could select different things that prioritize different activities. But I definitely think use of technology, it's worth the time that's invested and the time that's diverted slightly in order to create a more engaging environment.
Okay, I think we've got time for another question.
Okay, so on the right, I've got a question: how can we make sure students learn at a deep level? Now, that's a really good question because we obviously want that type of learner. It is a challenge, particularly with younger learners. But I think, according to research, it's about collaboration, it's about reflection a lot of the time. If we can encourage those environments where students are doing that, then naturally they will become more will become deeper learners. But that's a key. If we want this, we have to kind of create that environment for students to have that have that collaborative and reflective environment where they're encouraged to do it, maybe forced to do it, but certainly encouraged to do it, so that naturally they're trained in order to create these type of to do these activities, which will hopefully make them into a deeper learner.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I think we'll wrap up now. You should have been able to download your certificate. There's a box on the screen. Basically, highlight the item and click download. Then you just need to edit the name on the file, save it and print it. If you're on a smartphone though, or a tablet, you might not be able to do that. So drop us an email to the address on screen. I'll just go back and show that again. And we've got a question coming in about more webinars. Yes, we have. Let me move this off the screen here. So our next webinar is Thursday the 21st of March at 11 AM UK time, where one of the Mindset co-authors, Lucy Passmore, will be talking about pronunciation for the IELTS speaking test. So please do join us for that. We're hoping to have an IELTS webinar once a month, and we'd love to see you. And all of our webinars are recorded, and they'll be available on the Cambridge University Press ELT YouTube channel and also on the CUP blog. And you should receive an email sometime next week with that link. So I wanted to say thank you ever so much to Jishan for that fantastic and insightful presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone, as well, for your input, particularly different ideas of technology. That's really made me think about what other approaches I can take.
And hopefully we'll see you all again in March for the next session. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.